coming to a crunchy question or problem, I always think it's wise to take a step or two back and try and unpick some of the assumptions that underpin an issue, the bigger picture, if you like. Now, not everyone would agree with some of the conclusions that I come to. That's fine. This is a debate, not an echo chamber, although some people may be surprised to hear that. But it's right we robustly test the proposition before us to try and understand the structural issues that underpin this bill. Let's consider the key issue here, that rising welfare costs could lead to making the welfare budget unsustainable. The assumption often made is that welfare costs rise because of individual failings, people being lazy, unwilling to work, or even dishonest, work shy, in other words. But this assumption doesn't stand up to scrutiny. The welfare bill isn't growing because people suddenly became lazy. It's rising because our economy and our society are fundamentally broken. Broken because of 14 years of cuts, of dehumanised punitive changes wrapped up as reform, but little more than a brutal disciplining of the workforce, compliments of the benches opposite. A workforce increasingly finding itself trapped between insecure low pay and in-work poverty, or a humiliating workfare programme that has sucked the marrow out of millions. One that has left them drained, burned out, and leading to the soaring mental health crisis we now see. Madam Deputy Speaker, what does explain our dilemma is the fact that work itself has fundamentally changed. Jobs are less secure, often poorly paid, and many who work full-time still need benefits because wages don't meet the basic costs of housing, food, childcare and utilities. On top of this, the cost of living crisis is being driven by a toxic mix of structural failures. The climate crisis has increased volatility in global supply chains, everything from microchips to semiconductors, pushing up food and energy costs. At the same time, companies operating under monopoly and oligopoly conditions, particularly in the energy, water and food sectors, have taken advantage of this disruption to engage in price gouging, driving profits sky high while families struggle to make ends meet. As has been repeatedly pointing out, the weakness of trade unions has limited workers' ability to bargain for pay rises that reflect rising costs, costs that by and large governments have failed to cap. Yes, caps on energy prices have been half-heartedly attempted, but what about a cap on rents, on greedy landlords? What about capping the large agri-corporations pushing up food prices, on water companies extorting from all of us? These are the underlying structural causes. Their collective outcome, a relentless squeeze on the real incomes and increased reliance on welfare to simply survive. In truth, our welfare system is increasingly the state subsidising employers who pay poverty wages, landlords charging unaffordable rents, and corporations extracting vast profits, all at society's expense. And all the while, our climate and ecology declines, adding to that instability. Today's bill, at heart about balancing the books by tightening welfare eligibility and gatekeeping access, won't address these root causes. It still punishes victims rather than tackling the structural failures, and I cannot support it. That's why I'll be supporting the reasonable amendment of my honourable friend from York Central. Yes, the Labour government has made a start on many of those structural issues, the Trade Union Act, GB Energy, the Leasehold and Reform Act, but it must go further and faster if we are to make a real impact on who our economy works for and to ultimately bring down the welfare bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, welfare reform should deliver dignity and fairness, not austerity and exclusion. Until we face these deeper truths, we'll continue addressing symptoms rather than causes, perpetuating the very injustices we claim to want to solve and that so many of us came into this place to sort out. Yeah.